Your body does not produce fatigue to get you to rest or pace. It only produces symptoms like fatigue to tell you that there's an unanswered emotion right now in this minute. You are not broken. Your body consciousness just feels like you're not listening, and you're not. But through no fault of your own, you've been taught to repress its information. Most people that get these conditions are extremely empathic and they want to help everyone. And they've been taught to do it to such an extent that they put themselves last, you know?
When you have symptoms that are screaming at you, but every test comes back normal and the doctors keep saying that there's nothing wrong with you, my guest today would say that there is something very wrong. These symptoms might be the most important messages ever ignored. If you're new here, I'm Raelan Agle, and this is where we dive into raw, real stories and insights from people who've recovered from conditions like CFS, Long Covid, fibromyalgia, and so much more. After over 230 interviews here and counting, one thing is clear. Recovery isn't about trying harder. It's about listening deeper. Today, I'm joined by the incredible Dr. David Mickel, tuning in from Agle, Scotland. Even back when recovery stories were harder to find, even then, dozens of people I've interviewed kept saying that Mickel therapy was what helped them get their lives back. He is a medical doctor turned mind-body trailblazer and one of the earliest voices supporting patients when the system left them behind. Dr. Mickel teaches that symptoms aren't random, they're intelligence. And today, right now, we're talking about how to stop managing symptoms and start responding to what your body's actually asking for. This is an interview to listen to all the way to the very end. Do it in chunks if you need to. It is pure gold. Let's welcome the incredible, insightful, compassionate, and charmingly funny Dr. David Mickel. Dr. Mickel, so incredible to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to speak to you.
Oh, I have 1,000 questions. I'm going to try and keep it to less than 1,000. I know. I'll go for maybe no more than 900.
Don't worry. You carry on.
So many things to dive into, but I'm really curious, and I know people watching and listening would love to know, how did you get into this type of work?
Oh, well, circumstances really. I many years ago had a girlfriend who had what was called myalgic encephalomyelitis, and obviously I had a very close-up personal opportunity to observe what she was going through, and and at that time there was a lot of "you're depressed" and it's psychosomatic. Well, psychosomatic's a whole different term that medicine's got wrong. Anyway, it was by observation with her, and I really had it kind of lit a fire within me that I just wanted to find an answer to it. So I started I was working as a general practitioner. I think you have them in America where you're like a family doctor. And I just started, I got disinterested and bit scunnered is the word I would use with medicine at that time. So I went off and trained in hypnopsychotherapy and NLP techniques to try and treat people with chronic fatigue. Was my main goal. And I learned such a lot from that. Made some of them worse at the time, definitely for sure. And then through observation, watched people starting to make progress on their journey to recovery, almost by accident at the time. And then I sort of learned from the early cases that there was something else going on for me anyway. I thought it was linked to emotions, but not the emotions that I've been taught about in medical school, which is, if you have a negative thought, you produce a negative feeling as an emotion. And I realised that it was more a kind of subconscious emotional feeling that the person was quite often not aware was actually within their body. And I worked with that for a good couple of years, and then I started to, I don't know, I just drew out a lot of information from treating them. And Mickel therapy came out of it eventually. It's evolved a lot from then. I think because I've got a touch of ADHD, I'm sure. I get bored with things very quickly, so I had to make this as simple as possible, not just because people have terrible cognitive problems and brain fog, but it just needed to be simple so that it could be delivered to, as young as possible, because we're starting to see cases of, young children, 9 and 10, are developing full-blown symptoms. It's just terrible. So I've made it as simple as possible, even though it's not easy, is what I would say. So that's how I got into it. What a long answer I gave you there. I do.
Oh, that's incredible. I can't even imagine what the response was from the medical community to taking this shift in treatment approaches.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've never felt embraced for the work that I've done with chronic fatigue in the medical fraternity. It's too stuck in its old ways of, it's a network of doing studies, and if it doesn't involve medication, they're not that interested anyway. But things are changing. But yeah, I ended up leaving that job after, you work really hard to become a doctor in this country, as I'm sure is the same in America. Is that you work really hard to get there. I got there and I got a great job where I wanted to live, which is in Scotland and Elgin. And these are viewed as jobs forever. Once you get them, you stay that doctor for, 30 years. And after about 5 years, especially with my interest in chronic fatigue and ME and fibromyalgia, they were my principal interest, I managed to last 5 years. So, much to the horror of my mother, I left after a very expensive training in medicine, and I took 8 years off just to work purely on trying to work out how to develop Mickel therapy. And even when I returned, I came back into medicine, but I went into emergency room work. So I did emergency medicine as a specialty. And that's mainly because I don't really get a lot of the way that medicine works. You give one tablet, you have to give another one to counteract the side effects of it. At least in emergency medicine, people were coming in life or death. It was patching them up from terrible trauma, physical trauma, or resuscitating them, and it kind of fitted my energy better. Sounds terrible, sound macabre, but I was keen to avoid becoming just oh dear, you've got a headache, let me give you a tablet, without exploring, well, why is the body creating a headache? It's not a question you're taught to ask in medicine. You're taught to think of the physiology and the potential pathology behind a symptom rather than what could be going on energetically, which I think is a whole branch of medicine that's just about to take off. It's been about for a long time, energy work and vibrational medicine. But I think medicine's going to have to change a lot. But they haven't embraced me yet. No, not as yet. Even though I treat their patients all the time, which is a bit frustrating, you can imagine. I treat people from all over the world, and their doctors are like, yeah, you must have just been depressed, or you have heard it all. No, these people are understandably cheesed off with their experience of feeling absolutely dreadful. So who wouldn't feel depressed? But it's not a psychological illness. None of them. I call them energy disorders now. I stole that phrase from a guy called Steve Rother, who's American. But he said I could have it. But energy disorder for me just gets over the idea that we are energetic beings. We're not made of solid, just atoms. They're actually vibrational. And anything that has an energetic effect on the cell's function is what you should be addressing your cure at, rather than dealing with the effects of what happens after. We can talk about the multiple effects. You'll know the multiple chemical sensitivities, etc., which are all absolutely valid. The POTS scenario with the autonomic nervous system being just screwed up, basically, but their effects rather than looking at what's causing it. So I always felt like we were just pouring water into a bucket that still had a hole in the bottom of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And it can be overwhelming and so terrifying because when you face a lot of these conditions, it can feel like you're having a multi-system, multi-organ shutdown. It just feels all
Yeah.
of a sudden like nothing works anymore and you can't eat. And it's like, how
Yeah,
did I go from a pretty normal functioning human to not functioning at all?
absolutely. And that's what led to my hypothesis, which I got into a lot of trouble for as well, but saying that it was a condition affecting the hypothalamus gland. Because the hypothalamus gland for me is the master controller of every system in your body. So it has direct influence over your autonomic nervous system, your immune system. It just has impact on everything. And believe it or not, in my whole time as working as a doctor and training to be a doctor, they never mention the hypothalamus unless it involves some thyroid tests. But the hypothalamus tells the pituitary, therefore the adrenals, what to do. So if the hypothalamus is overwhelmed, everything goes into a state of physiological fight or flight, but not necessarily triggered by fear. So most people with energy disorders like chronic fatigue will recognize that, while they're fearful of the symptoms, there's nothing actually usually in their life that could be a persistent trigger in terms of fear. And it's because it's all the other emotions that are backed up, in my opinion, of course.
So you spent all this time researching and developing Mickel therapy. What exactly is it?
Well, what it's become is an understanding that we have what I call body consciousness. Yeah, people call it body, mind, etc. And I often used to ponder this and think, well, I know there's nothing inside me. I've cut open bodies. There's nothing there that's like a little brain with intelligence within the body, but it's more of an energetic field. So I imagine body consciousness as being a sensory field that we all have emanating from every living being. And what it does is it interacts with every situation we go through in life, which is also producing an energy, its own imprint. And when the two energies mix, the mix of the two sparks the creation of emotion. So my understanding is body consciousness, you're born with it. So if you look at a young baby, it's got a very fluid, natural relationship with body consciousness and emotions. It doesn't apply any filters. It just cries, laughs. It just does what it likes. And everything is working perfectly there. So I often look, because I used to do a lot of what they call baby checks, which is newborn babies, and you look at them, and I think this is a being with not cognitive or brainy intelligence, but they're emotionally absolutely intelligent. They're laughing, crying, they're just trying to communicate. So anyway, so I believe that emotions are not created by thought and therefore cannot be influenced by thought. They are, if your sensory field or body consciousness comes across a situation that sparks the emotion of anything that's negative, a dislike or an anger, then that emotion arises within you. But in common day culture, what happens is we're we're made to conform. We have to go to school when we're 5, even though we might think, well, I don't want to. So then we start to develop what I call a repressive state. We're repressed. We repress these emotional signals that are absolutely natural and truthful to you as a person, not necessarily to everyone else. One person might want to do something, and that's okay. They were not repressing their true emotional essence. And then what I think happens, but don't ask me exactly what happens because it's very complicated neural pathways that I don't fully understand. But I think the seat of assessment of emotions is probably linked to the hypothalamus. So as we go through life and we're repressing our true nature, which is the emotions that we have no control over, they just arise like, I am angry whether you like it or not, says the body. And because of our need to conform and follow certain programs, etc., in our life, we're all repressed, and these emotions have a an impact on the hypothalamus, and over time, just gradually, the hypothalamus tries to balance back the fact that energetically these emotions are seeking some kind of action. And because it doesn't happen, the hypothalamus goes into a state of overwhelm and triggers your whole system to act as if it's in fight or flight, but not necessarily with fear. So Mickel therapy is about taking that as the cause of symptoms, and then we teach people to translate their symptoms back into the potential blocked emotion. Yeah. So whether that be anger or occasionally fear or grief, or a concept that I came up with was body boredom. It's like a lack of fulfillment of ourselves. We and you'll probably understand this yourself, is we get ourselves into jobs that we're doing to pay the bills, but they fall a little bit short of fulfilling us. So we get stuck in that rat kind of, it's just a trap, isn't it? We shouldn't be doing it. And so when that happens, all these emotional needs are still being created by the body consciousness, because it's assessing everything energetically around us and saying, this is not for me. Why am I why am I in a call center in Delhi, trying to sell a pair of gym shoes, or what do you call sneakers? And it's like, this is not me. This does not resonate with me. I'm not in alignment with who I am. So anyway, Mickel therapy, we translate through the process of it, the symptoms back into the emotions, and then we teach different tools to encourage the person to empower their emotions through changing their choices and their behaviours and their words. And by doing that, there's a release of the backlog of emotions that's causing the problem with the hypothalamus, and they start to get immediate responses. So in short, we empower people to be absolutely aligned with their emotional truth, and their emotions are caused by, not by thought, by an energy transfer. So these are emotions they've always had. It represents who they are. And the only time it causes problem is when it's blocked. So by responding to the symptoms as if they were just emotions being shouted at them, then the symptoms stop. And that's Mickel therapy. Good night, Raelan.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. Yeah.
That was incredible. That was pure gold. That sums up what so many people that I've interviewed have talked about as being helpful for them on their journey.
Yeah.
But it's such a challenging thing, I find, sometimes to put into words. And it's so different from what most of us were taught to do when we're feeling unwell, to think this way at all. Do you find it takes people a while to get on board with this approach?
Well, to be honest, at the start, when I started realising for me that this was what it was all about, it started to appear like everyone was going to have to get divorced, pack their job in, get rid of the kids. But it's not about that. It's the emotional. I've learned there's many ways that you can release the blocked emotion in terms of expression of it in your actions and words without dramatic change in your life. Or else Mickel therapy would not have lasted 25 years. But back to your point, I think because I'm such a terrible businessman, right, I never got into this as for a business. So I don't know how I scraped by. It's amazing. They're absolutely amazing. It'd be a great book, but it's never getting written, by the way. Yeah, I realised that quite often, more often than not, Mickel therapy is the last place people come to. And it's not just because I'm very poor at advertising or marketing. I think it's just they come after they've tried everything else, and then they're really open to try anything because they say, oh, yeah, I've tried everything. This is my last stop. And so, it feels adds a bit of pressure, but yeah, it used to be difficult, but you have noticed yourself in our common day culture, we speak differently. We talk about energy much more. It's not just in California. Even in Scotland, we've come out our caves and said there's good vibes today, instead of, oh, it's cloudy. It's just, we're much more energetically vocal. You know, we speak about energy. We're starting to talk about consciousness, and it's music to my ears because it's been a long 25 years. When I first started talking about body emotions and stuff, there's a place near me, I don't know if you've heard of it, called the Finton community. It was founded, it was like a 1960s hippie, where they believed that all their vegetables grew better because there was fairies at the bottom of their plot. Anyway, so it attracted all the hippies, most of them American, I should say, not Canadian, really. And they all thought I had been spending too much time there when I started trying to talk like this. Because it's very difficult. I can try and make it, I could answer your questions as a medical doctor, but I would just sound like a textbook that was very dull and boring, and what's the point? I think it is literally time for us all to recognise that energy is what it's all about. Energy and consciousness.
Yeah.
God, I sounded like a preacher there.
I was just trying to think, even now, how challenging it is to bring this up around people. And people are more and more getting it. Sometimes, when people ask me what I do or what my channel is about, and I just, here we go. And I try, and sometimes people are like, oh, yeah, have you heard of this person or that person? But more often than not, it's kind of a blank look of, that sounds made up.
It's much easier to just say, mind your business.
Yeah. So it has to have been crazy for you to watch over the years, from being one of the only people out there talking about this. And I can't even believe this was available while I still had CFS, while my mother had it. But it was just, it was hard to find information back then. But now we have quite a few programs coming out, and coaches and lots of people that came off the trail of your work directly that are using your exact approach. So do you see, because it can be confusing for people now because we do have so many options. So is there differences between Mickel therapy and some of the other programs you're seeing around, or are they all aligned with the same?
I think the main difference is the source of emotions. So previously, there's been a shift. We thought that it's what we thought that created how we feel. Well, it's just wrong. We can have negative cognitions and thoughts. If you sit long enough and think of something terrible and miserable, you'll feel miserable. But my contention is that will not create symptoms unless that misery is in agreement with your body emotion. So if your body emotion says, no, I'm not miserable, I just need you to listen to me in terms of that person there. Because I know you spoke about boundaries recently, and that's one of the key parts that I use. It's the first stage, really, is let's get you energetically defined so that you don't take any crap from anyone, basically. So if your body's producing anger signal and you're thinking unhappiness about something else, it's not going to have any impact on your symptoms. So I suppose the other way to look at it is, once people have gone through the recovery with Mickel therapy, they can still be miserable, but just don't leave it too long. Because, don't sit in misery, because you're at risk that your body says, well, I have to send symptoms if you don't action my emotions. Yeah, I think the understanding about emotions, because clients mention to me things like the guy from New York, the brilliant guy who came up with emotions about back pain and things, DeSarno or something.
Dr. John Sarno, yeah.
Yeah, so I hear about him a lot, and I hear about all these other names who I don't, because I don't read anything about anybody else. I watch your show because it's entertainment, and I like seeing people tell positive things. Is that there's a massive movement towards things that are helping people to a certain degree. And I'm not egotistical enough to say that this is the only way forward, but I think it's one of the best because it's so simple. He said slyly. But things like, because I know you have an interest in brain reprogramming or retraining at the moment, and I don't know an awful lot about it, but it sounds like what happens is that, for me, when emotion arises, when we're young, we create a repressor. So part of us becomes the repressor in our brain, and it goes, I will not action this emotion and put up clear boundaries or whatever, or look after my needs instead of looking after other people. It's like a repressor part of our cognition, and it's very subconscious. So I think that part of brain retraining is fantastic because that removes the repressor. And then the other part is, I call it the narrator or story maker, and it's just a liar. This part of our brain, it just makes up stories. It's just rubbish. And I think evolutionary, that has happened because, back in caveman days, things were scary. People died from terrible things. And so your brain was evolved to just create fear all the time. It was the only way you could be protected. But we're not back there now. That's not it. That bit should shut up. It's not a scary, scary world like the brain makes out, So there's the narrator and the repressor. So I think a lot of brain retraining, reprogram does a very good job with the repressor. So once you switch off repression, then you're more likely to access behavioural change that you wouldn't have had before. But I think the one part, and I should work with it's often suggested actually by clients, why don't you have a little bit of brain reprogramming in it? And I say, well, first of all, I don't really know what it is. And secondly, the thing for me is because it's all about emotional empowerment. So I never address what's going on in someone's thoughts in Mickel therapy, because there's a strange thing happens when you empower your body emotions. It's like your body consciousness takes charge as you realign. I think the analogy I used before, it's a bit like up until now, your head's been like the chef de cuisine. Yeah, it's in charge of the whole kitchen. And once you've gone through Mickel therapy, that all changes. Your body consciousness becomes the chef de cuisine and your head becomes the sous chef. And it just naturally does what it's told, or it gets the sack. So, yeah, I think there are many programs. A lot of them are designed to deal with effects rather than true root cause, which for me is emotional. Things like we go on crazy diets and we cut out sugar. God, a world without sugar. And these things that we do to counteract some of the effects further downstream from what the hypothalamus is doing. But the only one thing that the hypothalamus responds to is a removal of backlog of your core emotions or body emotions, or it's like your soul's communication with you. I think the more because I've always been interested in spiritual things, and I think the body consciousness is your soul. I mean, we didn't come to planet Earth just to piddle about and feel miserable and unwell. So it's obviously when symptoms come, it's just like a bit of a wake up. It's like, come on, we're living in a repressed state. We're not going to enjoy what we came here for.
So I suspect the overwhelming majority of people are walking around with some level of a backlog of emotions.
Yeah.
So can you give us some examples of what do you do about that? How do you start to unpack that?
So, well, first of all, the body guides you, yeah? So you remember and everyone watching will know when they have symptoms, there are times where they just increase. Yeah, there's like more fatigue or more brain fog. And in that moment, the communication from your body consciousness has got louder. So it's shouting now. Yeah. A simple example would be you're doing a task. Yeah, like you're working on the computer. You're editing this video. Good luck. You're editing this video and your cognition starts to go a bit misty. You can't concentrate the same. You feel a little bit fatigued. So in that moment, your symptoms have increased. So I start with, let's translate it into the emotion. What could it be? And it's going to be the frustration. Something's not working out as easily as it should, or your body consciousness has just got bored. So because it's fickle, the body consciousness does not respond to what your head tells it wants to be doing. It just goes, I've had enough editing this. Let's change task. So you stop, you go out for a walk or whatever, and by even going for a walk, your symptoms can reduce because you've responded to the alert from the body consciousness. Things that there are key symptoms that correspond to certain emotions. Brain fog is almost always lack of fulfillment of some sort from the body. It's just saying, I am bored. And it expects you to recognise that and do something about it. Painful muscles, joints, this kind of fibromyalgia type thing, or jaw pain is your body consciousness has produced anger about something. There's been a source of unfairness that it feels has not been addressed. So if you go and address it, or practice addressing it, because it takes practice, putting up boundaries, is that the symptoms start to reduce linked to that. And it's a process of learning from your symptoms. So I quite often say to people, go and experience symptoms so that we have something to work from, you know? If you don't get symptoms, we've nothing to work from. The difficult ones are, and I've got a few clients like this who are so severely affected by symptoms, they're bedbound. Now, by that stage, their hypothalamus is so overwhelmed by a lifetime, usually, of repression of emotions, that getting them to be able to get up and rehabilitate physically and then enter a life where there's a possibility of new emotions arising to work with, that's the challenge with those ones, especially what they call ME for some reason. But yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah, very much so. I'm just thinking, this is incredible, and so many more people are talking about this, and I'm seeing it all over the place that people are getting better. People after decades of being unwell are just doing incredible. However, probably still millions of people in the world are still being told things like, well, focus on pacing and living with your symptoms and, managing your energy, rest more, or some of them are told you just need to exercise more. It's just like, what are your...
I think, and that's such a good point. Let me start with pacing, yeah? I can't imagine, if the body wants you to pace yourself, then it would produce a healthy symptom. It wouldn't produce fatigue. It would produce just a normal, like if you haven't walked more than a mile for 20 years, then to walk a mile and a half, you're going to feel it. But that's not a symptom as such. It's not part of the big spectrum of horrible crash fatigue sort of thing. Is that because every symptom has an emotion behind it, I cannot think of an emotion that says, go and just pace. Go and just pace us a little bit. It doesn't make sense. And the other way of dealing with it is people are told to push through their symptoms and then rest. Well, if you push through your symptoms in response to an emotion that is seeking some source of joy, for example, then if you don't find the joy, then you haven't answered the emotion, so the symptoms don't change. And I have a key phrase we use in Mickel therapy, which is symptoms are never sent to tell you to rest. Your body uses healthy tiredness for that. And that's always true. And I've known it forever. But when I say it to people, I do a lot of online stuff, so it's okay, they can't hit me, but they don't like it very much. But it's absolutely true. Your body does not produce fatigue to get you to rest or pace. It only produces symptoms like fatigue to tell you that there's an unanswered emotion right now in this minute. And that's the other point I was going to make. We never go back into the past, because there's something I realised early on, is that no matter how traumatic your past has been, your body consciousness stores emotions at a cellular level. Like if I don't know, if I asked you to think in your head of the first relationship that went wrong in a bad way, you'd feel it. Yeah, you'd feel it, because in that moment your body goes, oh yeah, I remember it, and it creates the emotion. Is that because of that being the case, it's only interested in what you do today and tomorrow, because it's an active sensory field around you that's acting in response to what's happening now, not yesterday or the day before. So we never do any trauma work. I think trauma work is not something I would personally want to do myself, because who wants to relive all that stuff? But it doesn't work, because you can't change it. unless you're Doctor Who or something.
That's interesting. Yeah, whereas we have a lot of focus on doing trauma work right now.
Yeah.
Could it perhaps be a perception of, because I guess if you're still feeling the feelings now and then you're working on that in some way, you are addressing what happened in the past, but just dealing with how it's affecting you in this moment.
Except emotions are created, so they come from a source, yeah? So the emotion of source has to be here and now for you to be able to do anything that actions it and expresses it. So I think the difficulty, I'm sure it all just comes from the fact that we view people, or if we have it ourselves, we view symptoms in a way that says, I am broken in some way. And it was that thing that broke me. But the key point that Mickel therapy drills into people is you are not broken. Your body consciousness just feels like you're not listening. And you're not. But through no fault of your own, you've been taught to repress its information. So even though the hypothalamus is overwhelmed, it's not broken. And it can go back to normal like that. You know, I think you've had a few stories of people who something clicks and they're better. And probably if I had 10 minutes with them, I could work out what happened at the emotional level, but it doesn't really matter. They're better as long as they know what to do if they start to repress their emotions again and their symptoms come back, which is something in Mickel therapy. We're very clear that at the end of it, people should be able to tell you why they're no longer getting symptoms, because they're life tools after that. You've heard of the 3 keys to health. Sorry, that's my computer blipping, but I can't stop it. It's the 3 keys to health, which I came up with about 16 years ago, just from looking at what are these people doing? They get brilliant reduction in their symptoms in that moment, and out of it came, which I know you've spoken about, is key one for me is you have to go through life creating clear boundaries around unfair treatment from other people. It's basically your body consciousness or soul says, we did not come here to be treated like that by anyone, whether it be family, friend or foe. It's just, if the person won't change and stop it, you have nothing more to do with them. That's the ultimate boundary. You're finished. Fired from your life. The second part is, part of our repression has often been that we're felt uncomfortable expressing, especially men, expressing our true emotional feelings. So key 2 was about communicate your feelings in an honest way when necessary, but it's really to facilitate your other behavioural changes. So I always say that actions speak louder than words. So if you couldn't speak at all, you could still recover very easily with Mickel therapy. The third key is so huge at the moment, it's ridiculous, because everything's changing in the world, yeah. And key 3 is all about, it is now time for everyone to seek fulfillment of their emotional needs, yeah. So the body will produce, that's boring, that's rubbish, I don't like that job. I don't like that job at all. Why am I still doing it? It will produce signals like that. And it doesn't necessarily say, well, walk out the job. It says, can you change it to make it more aligned with who we are? If not, then we might need to consider stopping it. So key 3, the important part is most people that get these conditions are extremely empathic. So they feel other people's pain. And because of that, they have this inbuilt healer kind of energy where they want to help everyone. And they've been taught to do it to such an extent that they put themselves last, you know? So it's all about put yourself first, then you can look after other people. In other words, people should only drink from the overflow from your full glass. Yeah. Don't be approaching people with your half-empty glass when you're thirsty and giving them your water. That's like madness. So that's the first part of key 3. The second part is to start to understand that everyone's body consciousness is changing and really rapidly. The things I'm seeing now are different from even 5 years ago. Is that the body has an incredible ferocity within it to be fulfilled and experience joy. And so the stages of reaching joy are stop doing things you don't like, and start trying anything to feel a sense of joy, which is what Mickel therapy, the recovery stage, is all about. It's just find joy, let's find it. Doesn't that sound easy? It's very frustrating because it's not so easy. It's simple, but not so easy.
That just sounds like the recipe. The whole time you were talking, I could just feel myself lighting up. I'm like, yes, all of these things are how I want to be living my life. But just everything in me just relaxed. I'm like, oh my goodness. It feels so obvious almost, but yet so many of us are so far away from those things.
Yeah. Well, that is true. But you don't need to be, it doesn't take massive change. It's not about, like I said, it's not about getting divorced and becoming unemployed and selling the children. It's not about that kind of stuff. It's about just the closer you can get to that natural flow of your emotions, where you're a joy-seeking. Am I allowed to swear on this channel?
Absolutely.
You're a joy-seeking, non-shit-taking person.
I want to get that embroidered on a pillow. Like I want that behind me at all times.
Let's get some merch. So I think what she'd say is, I am no longer willing to take any shit, and I thrive on joy.
I love that so much.
Let's get the merch.
So people definitely are going to want to know, like, what resources do you have for people? If people are watching, they're like, yes, I need more of this in my life.
Well, the resources that we've got at the moment, they've changed a lot, because it used to just be one-to-one with people that are trained, but I realised that gets really expensive, because you can't help the fact that your life might take a little bit longer to get in order according to your body's request. So I've developed an online course, which is basically me rambling on like this, but in a more focused, constructive way. It's an online course that runs you through the whole treatment. So there's a self-treatment module, which is not expensive. I think it's about £150, so that's probably similar dollars. I don't know what Trump's doing next, but there's a second.
Everybody does.
And really, the core part of the course is the same for all three choices of courses. The difference is that you can have some inclusive sessions put in that works out much cheaper than paying the £90 per session or something. So there's the essential course. It comes with 2 sessions. And if you've got a really complicated case, and you're going to say, well, how do I know if it's complicated? It feels complicated to me. Well, the best way to go about that, you can book a free 20 minutes with myself. We just do a Zoom chat, and I can assess what one is more likely to, if you're going to need a few sessions, I'll just tell you. That's basically it. So, yeah, it's not about me becoming rich. It doesn't appear to ever want to happen that way. So they're set at a price that they're affordable, and also you can pay them up over 3 months if you're stuck, And that don't tell everyone, but although there are limits on the number of sessions, you're never left. You're in safe hands. I will not have it where you're allowed. That's my second session. I'm not quite there. Is that it? No, it's not. You just get another session. You pay what you can. That's where it's at. So it's all on the website, mickeltherapy.com. I've got a few ranting videos on YouTube, like yourself, Raelan, except mine don't get 48,000. Mine get 48 views. But they're really good. They're informative, The only other thing I'm about to do is I'm developing a neurodivergence course, because I've got a specialist interest in why the world could ever dare start to make people with ADHD, dyslexia, and these type of spectrum of things, why they could ever try and pathologise it and give them a label that says you're sick, we need to give you medicine, drives me nuts. These people are the trailblazers, right? All this linear thinking nonsense that keeps culture not feeling threatened, forget it. These people are going to bust everything down. So neurodivergence, I am supporting in my own way by creating a course that allows you to become Wired for Wonder, it's called.
Dr. Mickel, you are one of my favorite people I have ever met in my life. This is absolutely incredible.
Thank you very much. You're making me blush.
We need thousands, millions more of you in the world. Thank you so much. Every word of this has been pure gold, just so
You're welcome.
helpful. I have so much gratitude for the work you've been doing for decades, for so many people that have gotten their lives back that
Thank you.
likely weren't getting what they needed from the conventional medical system. So, of course, all of Dr. Mickel's information, resources, his wonderful YouTube channel, everything's going to be linked in the description here. So definitely take a moment to take a look, because I guarantee you need to be having more than 48 views with the work that you're doing. This is spectacular. Yeah, I'm going to link here too. I'm trying to think. Veronica Morrill is the first one that comes to mind. I'll link her interview. I've interviewed so many people that recovered because of Mickel therapy. So I can even list a few in the description. I'll put one up on the screen and I'll put a bunch in the video description. If this sounds good, people can watch it and learn about it from, what's it like from the patient perspective to go through the program. Thanks to everyone who's watching. Looking forward to your comments and hope to see you in this next video with Veronica.